Today's Daf Memvov is the blot with the Shvi on for Shvi Shel Pesach. We are up to the Gemara of Memvov Amud Aleph, and right in the middle of the page. And the Gemara says over here, Amalei, about 8 lines into the wide lines. Says the Gemara, Amar leida Papa l'Rava, Papa said to Rava, Chazima, see, teacher, Hani dvei Papa bar Abba, the family of Papa bar Abba. The Yav Zuzali Incha, that they would pay money lekargayu as taxes. What happened was that the government would collect taxes from everybody, and those people who didn't pay their taxes, they would sell the people off as slaves, and the money was treated as taxes, and these people became slaves of whoever bought them out until they redeemed themselves and paid them out. And we had a discussion yesterday regarding a goy, when they sell an evet to a yid, they're only selling the maisi yadav. They don't really own the essence of the goy. And we said the exception is when the goy sells himself. The question here is, because the king sold them as slaves, and Din Malchusadin, as Taisa explains, so how far do we take Din Malchusadin? Do we say Malchusadin is further than just the ordinary transaction, and the king owns the people, and therefore what he's selling to these people is the goof of this goy, or not? So he said here that this family would pay money, like a guy's taxes, and then these people would, the people that they paid, that they basically paid out for, would become their slaves. So the question is, Kinafki, when they left, would they require, when they paid their way back to the family, do they still need a get cheresin or not? Or they do not need a get cheresin? Or do they own the essence of the goy or not? Amalei, so Rava said, if I would have passed away and nobody asked the question, I wouldn't have been able to tell you this thing. Rav Shesha said, this is what Rav Shesha said. He said that Mehukayu, he said that Mehukayu Dahani, the stamp of these people, the Tafsha the Malka, sitting wearing the treasure of the king. Mono, that's what's lying. Malka Amma, the king said, Man, somebody doesn't pay the taxes. Mishtabid Laman Karga is indebted to somebody, is enslaved to somebody, does pay the taxes. And therefore it becomes the Eids, the essence of the goy becomes the Eids. Ikla the Gabla came to a town called Gabla, and Chaza, he saw Benois Yisrael, these Jewish girls, the Ma'abra and Megadim. He saw the Jewish girls who were marrying converts. Now, in order to become a convert, we have a few steps. You have to have, for a male, you have to have a circumcision, and then it's milah, and then you have to have tefillah going into the mikveh, then you have to have kabbalas and mitzvahs, which happens at the time of tefillah. And then in more Christmas, we talk about a special carbon they bring. So what happens by a male if they had a bris and they didn't go to the mikveh? Is that you have to consider a conversion or not? So we have a number of opinions. So I saw these girls that were getting impregnated from Gerim, Shemol, these getting circumcised, but they did not go through the immersion in the mikveh. That's one thing that he saw. Second thing he saw was he saw Chamer, he saw Yiddish wine. The most goy diluted it. The Shosi he saw that he drank from it. That's problem number 2. As we'll discuss each one. The third thing he saw is Turmason. He saw these beans, the sholki that a guy cooked. The Gemara Shabbos, Rashi says, 7th payday, they had to cook it like 7 times before it became edible. But Goyim cooked it. The question of Bishal Akum. So he ate it. He didn't say a word. Also, the Kabbalah of Yechon, he came before Yechon. Amalei, he said, on these 3 issues, say, go out, first of all, make an announcement regarding the children of these women who were living with his Gadim, who malad and didn't pray. Well, in my opinion, they're not Jewish. And if they're not Jewish, and in my opinion, we learned a few days ago, the children of Mamzeim. B'neim Shahim Mamzeim, the children of Mamzeim, number 1. Number 2, Val Yenim, the wine, Mishum Yain Nesach. Now that they're Goyim, if they touch wine, it's Yain Nesach. And even though they're not directly touching it, they're just stirring it. They're only diluting it, and therefore it pushes the wine around. It's good. That's considered as if they're touching it. And the third thing is, well, to Mason, treat it like bishalakum because they're not knowledgeable. So more explains each one. Why the Shulman Zayd is consistent. In order to be a gay, you have to do both processes. You're going to make was a guy, and or a slave has relations with a Jewish girl. That's number one. Number two, because we say to the Nazir who's not allowed to drink wine, go. And Schoi goes, make circles, the Carmel is like, don't even get close to the vineyard. You might end up drinking. So here, treat this as if it's Yain Nesach, even though it isn't really Yain Nesach, the guy didn't touch it, stir it. Nevertheless, it's like Yain Nesach, because it's indirectly as if he moved it. On these beans, because they're not knowledgeable. Was it when they do with another? They try to study if they were knowledgeable, then what? A guy can't cook beans. Anything which can be raw, there's no bishalakum. But this is a possibility where you have to cook it 7 times. So therefore, the yeshba mishum bishalakum. So there's bishalakum for everybody. What's the difference? What's the relevance here? Whether you're eating, whether you're tam b'chach or not. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yechanan ki idach lishnas filo. Yechanan has like the other opinion. The main criteria is there something that's dignified, elegant that you would feed to family, to guests, royalty, lecha is a pasi bread, if it's not oila al shulchan malachim, there's no bishalakum. And these tremation are not oila shulchan malachim. If there's no bishalakum. However, the time of the enemy because they're not knowledgeable, you know what? They don't understand these complex laws. However, they should be permitted. And Allah, we pass like both of these rules, that if it's not oila shulchan malachim, no bishalakum, and also if it could be eaten raw, there's no bishalakum. Now we have different opinions regarding this gate. Gail Shamal V'Loitavol, a Gail that's circumcised and didn't go to mikveh. Rabbi Lezer says, it's a gate. It's a gate. She came, even if he just did milah, it's good enough. As we'll see more later, he says that it's milah itself is good enough. And how do I know that? We find that the Eden, when they left Mitzrayim, they all circumcised. Nowhere do we find that before Matan Torah they went to the mikveh. So less of the opinion, the Eden did not go to the mikveh before Matan Torah. And yet they became full-fledged. Proof that milah is sufficient. What about the other way around? He went just to the mikveh but did not mal themselves. Rabbi Shuv's opinion, that's good enough. Why? What about all the women? When a woman becomes a gayus, she can't have milah yet. What is it? Milah, tefillah, zarai, that tefillah is good enough. Shetavul lemolo. Chachamim say, Chachamim argue both, and they say you need both. Tavul lemolo, mola tavul, you do one without the other, ain't gay, actually, yamul yitbol. We disagree with Rabbi Lezer, who says that milah is enough. We disagree with Rabbi Shua says that tefillah is good enough because he learns from the imois, but rather you need both. Rabbi Yeshua says, now ask a question each one. Rabbi Yeshua, Nami, Nelov, Rabbi Yeshua, also, why doesn't learn from others that milah alone is sufficient? And Rabbi Lezer, Nami, Nelov, why doesn't is that tefillah is sufficient? You can tell me, no, you can't live imois because it ain't done in efshe, mishi, efshe. The reason why the imois milah is not an issue there because it's not possible. However, when it comes to the others where it's possible, maybe you need it. You don't learn a situation where it's possible from a situation that's impossible. Says the Gemara, you can't tell me that. That's the reason why he doesn't learn from the Imai is because, in fact, Rabbi Lezer doesn't believe in that principle. He holds you do draw parallels from different situations, even though this situation is impossible any other way, and in this situation it is possible. It makes no difference. Because the time how do you know for past future generations? You can only use your own personal money to purchase it, and not use Meiser money. Not use Meiser Sheni money to purchase it. Meiser Sheni, you have to take 10% of your produce and commute it to money, and then bring it to Shleim, and then you buy whatever you want. You cannot use that money to buy Korban Pesach and eat in Shleim. Why not? Never Pesach Mitzrayim. The first Pesach we had was in Mitzrayim. Never Pesach Mitzrayim, future generations. My Pesach on Mitzrayim, just like Pesach in Mitzrayim, ain't bo elam lachulin. There was no Ma'aser Sheni. It didn't arrive to Israel. So the reason there was no Ma'aser Sheni, but the reason why there was no Ma'aser Sheni because they had no. It wasn't possible. But the fact is, there was no Ma'aser Sheni. Is Av Pesach ha'amal l'doida, so to Pesach, which is for future generations, ain't bo elam lachulin. Can only come from ordinary. You learn something which is possible from a situation which is impossible. On Malay, Abdullah answer back. Even though it's not possible, it doesn't matter. The fact is, there was no Ma'aser Sheni used for the first Pesach, so you can never use it. So the question goes, so why don't we learn from the Jewish women that you don't need a milah? Ella the Gemara says you're right. The Gemara modifies the argument. The Torah, mikvah alone, everyone agrees that it helps. Mikvah and Kabbalah's and mitzvahs, everyone agrees that it helps. Kipligi, what about the other way around? The Molva like you just did milah, did not do tefillah. Abelazar Yalov Mabelazar says that's what I want. That was good enough because they never went to the mikvah. And Rabbi Yeshua said, but others Nami, they went to the mikvah and they had milah and they went to the mikvah. How do we know that? How they also had tefillah. Prior to Matan Torah, they had tefillah. But no, how do we know that? You tell me it says go to the people, and let them sanctify themselves, and keep them and launder their clothes or immerse their clothes. And you'll say, keep stone tefillah. In a place where you don't require, let's say a person who's tummy about Keddy, so on, doesn't require to wash his clothes or to immerse his clothes, yet he personally needs to feel. Matan Torah requires kibbutz, the clothes have to be put in the mikveh. Ain't a din to people to personally have to go to mikveh as well. So that's how we know they went to mikveh. Think about who said the dim on the kid maybe the reason why they had to wash their clothes is not because anything spiritual, just purely to be clean. You're out in the desert, and for Matan Torah, they should dignify themselves. For the following passage, it says, Moshe took it down the blood. He sprayed it on the people. We learned, and according to this view, the Ein Hazar B'Lei Tefillah. According to Rabbi Yeshua, every Hazar requires mikveh before you do the Hazar or right after you do the Hazar. Different opinions in the Shayim. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yeshua, since every you always need tefillah, so he holds you need milah and tefillah. Milah alone doesn't do it. So you need milah and tefillah, but tefillah alone does. Why? Because you learn from the Moshe. Says Rabbi Yeshua, how does he know they had tefillah? So he says, "It's simple, it's logic. Otherwise, but how did it become Jewish?" That person that again until they actually do both. Like we had before, the Chachamim would say, you have to do both milah and tefillah. Says Yimon Pshita, isn't it obvious? You always follow the rabbi. Because this case, even though it's Chachamim, even though it's anonymous, it's not really a rabbi, it's only an individual opinion. Man Chachamim Rabbi Yasi. The Tanya learned that if a guy comes into town and says, Mauti, I circumcise themselves, or light to Valti, but I didn't go to mikveh. Madbilin Isa says Rabbi Yehuda that he goes to the mikveh, umabikach. And what do I care if he was gemalit, he wasn't gemalit? The main thing is mikveh. Let him go to mikveh, that's good enough. So Rabbi Yehuda holds you can do either one, either milah or tefillah. So he holds milah alone is good enough, like the others did. And he holds that tefillah alone is good enough, like the Moshe. Even Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yeshi says, no, ain't matbili. I hold that the main thing is a bris. And therefore, we can't let him go to mikveh. Why? Because maybe he's just an Arvi that was happened to be circumcised. So therefore, he needs to do Hatafatam bris again. Says the Gemara, because I hold that you don't really tefillah milah enough. If he wants to do tefillah, he can do it on Shabbos because not really adding anything. Rabbi Yeshua says no. Since I hold that tefillah is the main thing, can't do it on Shabbos because you are fixing things on Shabbos as makal patish. Amar Malach analyzes. He said leficha matbilim gebe Shabbos. According to Yehuda, because you don't really need mikveh. You're allowed to play with Shabbos. Shita surely keep number of Yehuda. Either one is enough, and you had bris. That's good enough. So the mode van my feeling you could table mile also was explain as well. What's a chiddush? Tema. I would have thought. Rabbi Yehuda, Tfilik. I would have Rabbi Yehuda hold that mainly it's tefillah. Which will be Shabbos Lloyd. I would hold Rabbi Yehuda holds. Why did Rabbi Yehuda say? If he said I mallet myself, we don't trust him. He said no problem. Go ahead and go to mikveh before us. Not because he holds either one's good. Maybe old tefillah is the only thing that matters, and therefore as long as you table before us, that's good enough. That's what I thought. And therefore you cannot travel on Shabbos. The Komisaka Gavrik, Mashlan, Rabbi Yehuda holds, Rabbi Yehuda says, either going to the mikveh or having a bris, either one is good enough. Either one is good enough. And therefore, if you had a proper bris, you can go ahead and travel on Shabbos. Boy, Rabbi Yehuda question, boy, yeah. Boy. Rabbi Yehuda says, ain't my bill. You can't go to the mikveh on Shabbos because mikveh is the main thing. You can't do on Shabbos. Pshit, keep them. Rabbi Yehuda said, to be both. If you're going to go to Shabbos, you can't fix them up. The main thing is Mila. So if the main thing is Mila, why when he says I malad myself, Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot go ahead to the mikveh if Mila is the main thing. Because Hassan having Mila for we don't know if he was circumcised or not. He said I came in and he said I was Gemaus. How do we know? Having Mila for before us, Ema we will say Litwa is B'Shabbat. Why shouldn't he? Come that he can't. Rabbi Yehuda Tarti, but he needs both. Rabbi said there was a story once with Rabbi Chia ben the Rebbe. Rabbi Yosef adds Masi Rabbi Yishe Barav, also Rabbi Yishe ben Rab was there. And Rabbi Safra adds a third person, Masi Rabbi Yishe ben Rabbi Chia. Also, like they came before them, gave Shemol, but told the only circumstances who they told him he can't wait here. Ad Lamach till tomorrow. They're not building up. We cannot go to mikveh now. We have to wait till tomorrow because we need Mila and Tefillah. We'll do it tomorrow by day, and there were three of them there. Shmamna last one, three didn't finish. Shmamna gets you need three people, because with three people there, you need a bezin. Shmamna ain't a gate, achi yom, you need both Mila and Tefillah to be a full proper gate. Shmamna ain't mabil gate alive. You cannot be tabling a gate at night because it's considered judgment, and judgment can only be done during the day. So anyway, when name Nami, there's another thing you can learn from that. Shmamna Nami being a mumche, you need experts. Says the Gemara, Dilma de Iklon. It maybe just so happened to be that these three people were there. Doesn't prove, and they happen to be experts. Doesn't mean you actually need experts. So how do you know you need three people? Maybe just happen to be three people there. No, because Safra went out of his way to tell us there was a third person there. Obviously, he wants us to know there were three people there. Engaged, so the Gimel, a gay requires three people. A bezdin, mishpat ksibe. It says by them, the pasuk, it says mishpat. To tell you that what mishpat echil lechem kegei ke'ezach. Therefore, like any other court case, can only be done during the day. Taser already said yesterday in the Gemara that this is not really referring to the Tefillah, it's more referring to the Kabbalah mitzvahs we need the best. Yes, even if you didn't have a mind that Tefillah should be in the Shem Geirus, it's still good enough. So Rabbi learned. If a person comes along and says, I'm a convert, I would have thought, yes, why should we accept him? It says a pasuk, Itoch has to live with you, but you have to know who he is. What about boy? He came along, the aid of Imai's witnesses with him, and how do you know that's good enough? And we're already asking, of course it's good enough. But what do you need a pasuk? It says a pasuk, good. It says yoga, as long as he lives, I don't care how you know. And it says witness there, it's good enough. Itcha in your land. What do you mean your land in Israel? All I know is that that's Israel. that we can accept Gadim. Chutzlar and Haino accept Gadim, Chutzlars as well. Wherever they are with Im Kema, Tam Lebar say Etzisrael. The edit subject of Levinite. After Etzisrael, you have to bring proof that you were you say you converted. Where were you converted? Give us the name of the best. Why? Because maybe this person who's showing us that he's circumcised happen to be one of the Arabs there who circumcise themselves. And what's the reason? Because we think the ulterior motive. People think that living at Israel is a beautiful place, and therefore it's lying. So you have to bring proof. In Chutz La'aretz, there's no mile in being a Yid, so therefore they don't have to bring proof. It says the Gemara, even Rabbi Yehuda, these words of Yehuda, you have to bring proof even in the Chutz La'aretz. Then it says the Braisa Bo, who he came along with the witnesses. Why in the world do you need a posse for witnesses? Omar Rav Sheshes says, Omar Shamanu Shidizgaya Bebezin Shaplai. The Amri, these two witnesses are not real witnesses. They're not saying that we saw him become a geir. Of course, you don't need a posse for that. Shamanu, we heard Shidizgaya Bezin Shaplai. We both heard that he was converted into a Bezin, and that's good enough. Something I would have thought, let him shouldn't believe that you need better witnesses than that. Come on, let me do. Says then, but Israel, ainly about Israel. Wherever you are. We already used it for something else. So we answer, we learn one from Itcha, and we learn one from Imcha. Could be used already before Itcha, that he has to bring evidence that he is a ger. And now you're using it to tell me that you can accept Ger in Chutzlar. So we're therefore saying two different words. Where the it says in Pasuk, but Eretz, the Chum said that even Chutzlar, it's a Hakol Teres and Israel. The boy they needed that feel better become gated. Let's tell you what, that even in Israel you accept Ger, even in Israel. Why the Sag never thought they was Israel come guided. The only reason why they become gated is because they think they have benefits from Israel. Even now, today, there's no benefit in Israel. They have all these social forms of disseminating money, distributing money to everybody. Maybe that's why they converted. That no, that we accept Gadim even in Israel. Anyway, they are. Okay, this completes today's daf, and you should have a good Yom Tov. This covers Shri Yishal Pesach.